Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Business Breakdowns Live and a very happy new year. I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 times already, but hey, you can't say it too much. Welcome. My name is Japheth Mast, Director of Operations here at Management Consulted, and we're excited for this first ever live edition of Business Breakdowns. We had so much demand from our podcast and YouTube listeners from you all that we decided, hey, let's do it live and let's have some fun with it. So going forward, you can expect us to be here on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. I know today it's not 5 p.m., but we're going to be moving to a 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific schedule. So you can stay tuned to your email, to your calendars for invites to those meetings. I'm going to be moderating today's session. First off, would love to get to know you a little bit better. So if you can do one thing for me really quick and just let us know where you're calling in from. So using the chat feature here in Zoom or wherever you're tuning in from, and let us know one business you admire just as we kick off today's session. Amazing. So we're streaming all over. So we've got folks tuning in from YouTube. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. I see some familiar names in the stream there. We're on LinkedIn. We're on TikTok and a few other places. So thank you for tuning in to Business Breakdowns Live. Really excited for today's business conversation. I'm going to go to the chat really quick to shout out some folks. So I see we've got Boston represented. Welcome. We've got Bloomington. We've got New York. We've got Toronto State College. Amazing. Maryland, Minneapolis, Chicago. Amazing. Someone admires Amazon, beautiful. Patagonia, okay. Great business model. Wonderful. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining. So if you've got questions, you can use the chat bar here to ask them. We will take questions in the middle of the call between the two companies. So we'll take 3 minutes for questions, and then we'll take questions at the end. And we want to hear from you on which two companies to profile next. So start to think about that, which companies you'd like to have covered in one of these business breakdowns. All right, a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we dive into the first company here today for business breakdowns. A lot of you are kind of in the thick of consulting, recruiting, or you've got a case interview coming up, whether for consulting or an in-house corporate strategy role, something like that. And we've got an amazing team of coaches who are former McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. We'd love to work with you. And we've got a number of ways for you to engage with us. You can see here on the screen, we've got a 1-hour coaching session for $250. That's best for if you've got an interview coming up in the next week to 4 weeks and you just want a quick tune-up. And then our most popular program is called Black Belt. We've got a cohort that starts next Wednesday, January 15th, and have just a couple of spots left, but you'll work with the coach to go through each part of the recruiting process. They'll give you expert insight and feedback on your resume, on your networking plan, on case interviews, and more. And there's a couple spots left for the upcoming cohort. Last but not least, if you are 6 months or more out from recruiting for a strategy or a consulting role, then Super Prep is going to be the program for you. That gives you a taste of consulting with a 1-week consulting project kicking off February 1st, plus 20 hours of expert coaching, resume edits, and a whole lot more. Just 5 spots left for that. Scan the code here to get information on all these programs. We'd love to work with you. If you scan the code, you'll also get taken to a page where you can book a free 15-minute consultation if you're not sure which program's right for you. Amazing. All right. Well, we're going to dive into the first business breakdown. I'm joined by my colleagues, Jenny Ray LaRue and Namaan Mian here, who are going to break down eBay for us. Jenny Ray, I'm really excited for this. I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of run into the first business breakdown.
Thank you, Japheth, and hello, everyone. Welcome to today's business breakdown. I'm Jenny Ray LaRue. We're the expert consultants over at Management Consulted. And as we think about the consulting space, one of the things that's important to us is that people don't just think about consulting businesses, but they think about the business and the business breakdowns themselves. What does actually make a great company? Because one of the things that we've often taught about in the seminars that we do, that we work with our large organizations on, is how do you build a company for the future? There are a lot of other industries and practice areas that think about what's happening today or that think about what happened yesterday. That's not what today is about. Today is about what does the future of a company look like? And so we're going to dive into eBay. I'm really excited to introduce eBay. As we're getting started, I just want to mention that we do have a professional training relationship with eBay. And so we always want to acknowledge when we are working with a company that we're profiling here on the platform. However, today's conversation about eBay has absolutely nothing to do with the training that we did, and we did not use any proprietary data to present what we're doing today. In fact, if you wanted to create your own business breakdown, you could do exactly what we're doing, finding exactly the same public information, and then applying that information through the lens of your knowledge and expertise, just like we're going to do today. I'm joined by my colleague, Namaan. Namaan and I are going to fight over who has the hottest take for eBay. Namaan, are you ready for this?
Oh, I've been ready.
Great. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to kick off a little bit with eBay. Just who are they? What do they do as a company? We're going to talk through some key high-level data. I'll kick it over to Namaan for that. Then I'll take it back and I'll talk about eBay's business model. Then we'll do a little back and forth on some key metrics for eBay. And then we'll end with a hot take about eBay's future. So with that, I'm going to kick it off. eBay is a fun company for me to profile. This is one of the world's great businesses. And I think we knew that it was a great business soon after it launched, but I don't know that until it stood the test of time, we understood why it was a great business. In fact, eBay has withstood many different onslaughts of competition. There are people that have carved out pieces of eBay's business, yet eBay has continued to grow. eBay stands strong. eBay is a very profitable company. So I'm going to, kick it over to Namaan to talk through some of the specifics of that. But fundamentally, we all know eBay as kind of your grandma's garage sale brought to you online for treasure hunters to seek out the world's greatest treasures. It's a platform where you can flip your old stuff. Usually the stuff that is on eBay is used, and that includes sectors that they are focusing on right now, like car parts. And they are often rare. So it's not necessarily a single item, not only luxury items, but for example, it could include things like a Lego set that went out of style 8 years ago that someone is looking for to build either in a collection or because it's no longer available in stores. Because of that, eBay has a pretty unique carved out value proposition. They made a very high profile purchase of PayPal early on in the day in order to support their digital transactions, which was pretty revolutionary at the time. And we'll talk today about some of the challenges that eBay is facing, as well as some of the opportunities. So with that, Namaan, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jenny Ray. I think I just want to clarify for everybody that eBay is a two-sided marketplace. So third-party sellers can list items for consumers to buy, like Jenny Ray mentioned, and eBay makes money through listing, transaction, and advertising fees. And we're going to talk a little bit more in a minute about those key revenue drivers for eBay. The other thing I just want to call out before I walk you through some of the high-level stats is that eBay has three customer segments that you need to be aware of before we start this conversation. They serve buyers, they serve sellers, and they serve advertisers. And they have to keep all three of these customer segments happy. That's what makes this business such a unique business to be in, and sometimes a challenging business to be in. So with that context and framing out of the way, let me walk you through for the fiscal year ending in December 31st, 2023, some of the high-level stats that you need to know just to frame this conversation. So the first thing that I want to walk you through is just eBay's annual revenue, and this comes from their 2023 10K. So for the fiscal year ending 2023, eBay generated $10.1 billion in revenue off of $73 billion in gross merchandise volume. So they facilitated $73 billion worth of transactions in that fiscal year on their platform, generating a little bit over $10 billion of revenue for themselves. Out of that $10 billion in revenue, $7.3 billion moved down to the gross profit line. So you can start to get a sense of how healthy the margins are in this business just from comparing revenue to gross profit. Now, when you move from gross profit to operating income, you see a little bit of a bigger drop here. About $2 billion in annual operating income is the net profit that eBay is generating here in fiscal year 2023. And so you can see here that $10 billion in revenue, $7.3 billion in gross margin. This is a large business. It has healthy margins, and there's still a lot of runway and room for eBay to grow, and we're going to talk about that today. So, Jenny Ray, I'm going to turn things back over to you now that that context and framing is out of the way. Let you talk about how you'd be managing eBay today, and then I'll do the same.
Love it. Namaan, one of the things that I think is really fascinating is just to hark back to one of our earlier conversations when we talked about when people transfer, leaders transfer from one business to another. We actually specifically, if my memory serves me correctly, you'll have to correct me. We talked about the former leader of Starbucks who came from eBay. And the leap that happened there, it was from a fixed cost business, which eBay is, and I'll elucidate that in just a minute, over to a variable cost business. But also underlying that, you mentioned that their customers are multi-pronged. And I would argue almost, directly that their primary customers at eBay are the sellers. Whereas at somewhere like Starbucks, the primary customer is the consumer. It's the buyer. It's the person who's coming in to get a cup of coffee. And so if you are trying to transfer leadership from one sector to another, taking somebody who operated one kind of business with a specific type of customer and then moving them over to another one, it's not that it can't transfer, it's just much more difficult to do that. And so that's one of the reasons that these business breakdowns are fun for us, because it helps us get down to the brass tacks, like what makes this business operate. So as Namaan mentioned, this is a business that has very healthy margins. In fact, Namaan, I had to do a little bit of digging to figure out what the heck they're even spending money on, because the fixed costs are very evident. Those are the things like maintaining their technology, the platform, some of the customer service pieces of operating. But really mostly it's transaction fees. It's credit card transaction fees. It's the ownership that they take over some returns or misplaced processes, but mostly it's just transaction processing. That's almost everything that they're spending money on, which really does give an eye to why PayPal was such an important strategic purchase for them early on. And I also think it really highlights some of what will become incredibly important for eBay going forward. So with that, eBay is a fixed cost company. What that means is that largely they're focused on optimizing for revenue. They're not just focusing on price. They're definitely not worried about their variable costs, but they're really focused on optimizing for the revenue that they generate on the platform. Back to you, Naman.
Yeah, absolutely. So if eBay is optimizing for revenue, and I think the way they're doing that really is through volume, that really kind of leads into the first metric that I would be managing to if I was a leader at eBay, or the first thing I'd be thinking about if I had a case interview that had to do with eBay's future growth potential. And so the first metric I'd be looking at would be customer loyalty as measured by daily active users. And so when I think about eBay, I think about a platform. And when I think about platforms, I think about moats. And a platform's scale is its moat. The more sellers that you have, the more buyers you attract, et cetera, et cetera. It becomes a flywheel. So the fundamental question that I would be looking to answer if I was at eBay or if I was in a case interview dealing with eBay is how can I keep bringing customers back to the platform? How do I increase volume? And so maybe for buyers, that looks like daily deals that are sent to their inboxes. Maybe that looks like AI or machine learning driven recommendations that are sent out once a week. Maybe for sellers, right, eBay can take some of the technology that Shein has put to good use in the fast fashion world. Shein is able to leverage its machine learning models to predict the next fashion trend before it happens. And so, couldn't eBay predict the next hot collectible and send pricing guidance to sellers, right? And telling them, hey, look, like this 8-year-old Lego set, Jenny Ray, to use your example, like interest for this thing is on the rise. You've got it priced too low. And like If you can help sellers generate more income, then what are you going to be able to do? You're going to be able to increase the revenue you generate from listing fees and from close fees. And so I think that customer loyalty, right? Like figuring out ways to bring users back to the platform day to day, week to week, month to month is going to be critical to eBay's future success. That's the number one question I'd be looking to answer if I was at the company. The second question I'd be looking to answer if I was at eBay is I'd be looking to leverage PayPal to provide in-house financing to increase transaction volumes. So management consulted, we do a lot of things. One of the things that we do is e-commerce, right? And when we do e-commerce, we think about how do we continue to optimize the site and the checkout experience in a way that facilitates more transactions and facilitates faster transactions. What's the drop-off rate on my platform from add to cart to completed purchase? And so one of the things that can increase transaction volume and transaction amounts is financing. You see companies like Affirm and Afterpay and others offering these interest-free kind of payment plans, if you will, to customers across all different types of e-commerce settings. Why can't eBay offer an in-house solution through the technology it has with PayPal? It has the trust, it has the balance sheet, it has the technology to provide financing to buyers on its own. It can offer better terms to keep financing on the platform, and it can capture that incremental revenue from financing while simultaneously increasing its transaction volumes. Seems like a win-win to me. The third thing that I'd be paying attention to and looking at if I was at eBay would be its eBay Plus subscription. And I will be 100% honest with you. Before we started digging into eBay, I had no idea that eBay even offered something called eBay Plus. This was news to me, which I think is a problem for eBay, right? And so for people like me who have never heard of this, eBay Plus is really eBay's version of Amazon Prime, right? So you pay either $4.99 a month or $49 per year for special privileges on the platform. And those privileges include $5 off a monthly purchase, they include free expedited shipping, and they include free returns. And so if I was at eBay, one of the things that I'd be thinking about is how do I grow subscription revenue and just the number of subscribers to eBay Plus? Because the membership fee is almost 100% margin. If you listen to our episode on Costco, we broke down in a lot of detail, right, how membership fees at Costco drive almost like all of Costco's gross margin. And I could see that as eBay looks to expand its margins, eBay Plus is kind of a key prong in that strategy. Um, it's 100% margin, those membership fees. eBay Plus members are the platform's most active users, and they drive incremental revenue from listing fees, from final value fees, etc. And so I really would be paying attention to growing that program if I was at eBay. Jenny Ray, those are the three things I'd be looking at and paying attention to if I was at eBay. How about you?
Namaan, first of all, love the perspective, and I love how you said scale is the moat. I think that's so powerful. I just wanted to say that one more time because if y'all don't recognize that, part of why eBay even exists today is that they got an early start and that they had people that were on there. But when I was thinking about the future of the business, I went in a slightly different direction, Naman. I think there's some dovetail with what you talked about, but I was really thinking about in the future, eBay, everything that is not sold on eBay is an opportunity for eBay. And so when you think about the branding of the eBay platform, when you think about sellers usually only selling old or one-time items, it's much harder to build trust on an eBay platform than if you're selling something that you're manufacturing, if it becomes a very viable channel for someone who is an artisan or a craftsperson. Namaan, I know that you've advised a business specifically that does their own handmade jewelry. I'm guessing they don't sell on eBay, right? But anything that is so that was the phrase that came to mind. Anything not sold on eBay is an opportunity for eBay. It doesn't mean that they should pursue everything on the eBay platform, but it does mean that when you think about the metrics, that's going to be my kind of guiding North Star. And so The way that they call that is their just at their gross merchandise volume. The number that you mentioned earlier, Naman, from last year, $73 billion. So what I put on there was the average gross merchandise volume. I think eBay is going to want to focus on selling items that are traditionally more expensive. And so I think what you've seen here is you see competitors like Poshmark. In fact, over Christmas, I just bought something for the first time off of Poshmark. I mean, Poshmark is absolutely a direct competitor to eBay in this space. I spent more than I probably would have on a traditional eBay transaction. It was a really good customer experience. The app was easy to use. And so I think like really thinking about going after specific categories that have a high ticket price per item is going to be a key important strategy for eBay, and making sure that they're catering to that kind of that type of platform. This happened to be a piece of luggage that was out of date. And again, like it's a Samsonite piece of luggage. I may be one of the only people in the world that doesn't like a four-wheeled luggage that sticks out at the bottom. I like my wheels embedded inside the suitcase. My kids have one suitcase they always fight over. I found its dupe on Poshmark and I was able to buy it. So that's kind of the first thing, right? How much do people spend on an individual transaction? And are you pursuing categories? Are you doing advertising inside categories? Are you doing cross merchandising inside those categories? So that you're creating an incredible seller experience, so that if I have something that I want to sell, cars, trucks, right? Like things that are much more expensive, that I want to sell on those types of platforms, that I'm thinking about this as a great place to do it. The second one that I talked about was a central source brand verification, trust metrics or third-party authenticators. I think like one of the things you talked about, Naman, with the subscription is that eBay is trying to build trust with its buyers, right? It's trying to basically say, like, if you get a piece of junk from a seller, we're going to help you take care of that by being able to return it without friction, by being able to have not paid for shipping on the way in. So it's going to lower the barrier of risk for trying something on the platform. I can't remember the last time I purchased something from eBay, and that would be my absolute number one concern, right? It is because of that specific issue. Did they build significant trust on the platform? So I think that having for certain high value items, either a central authenticator or tools for authentication, or that like very hassle-free return process. Certainly going into Kohl's at this time of year, basically almost everyone who is at Kohl's at this time of year is returning something from Amazon through a very hassle-free process, right? So that kind of like trust building mechanism. I noticed that they actually did roll out something in Japan specifically for authenticating luxury items, but thinking about other categories, silver, Wedgwood crystal, right? Like where are some of the other categories that might need specific authentication, and how could you do that efficiently on the platform? And then I just really thought about category growth as my third, right? So not just per ticket item trying to go after things that are much more expensive, but looking for categories where eBay is a better fit and where they don't have a secondary marketplace like a Poshmark, for example. So I was thinking about a business that I advised a few years ago, which is in the spa parts business. One of the things that was very unique about this business is that it required some additional information to utilize the thing. Like, how do you know that this part is the right part, right? It's kind of there's a customer service aspect to some of these categories. So what they've done at that reseller is that they've taken, manufacturers, and they have people who you can call and talk to and say, like, my spa is broken. I don't know what it is exactly. Here's my model. And you can replicate a lot of that online, but I think that potentially some higher touch options for customer service when you're trying to figure out how to troubleshoot something for a high-end electronic or something for a hot tub or a spa, something that's not super portable, where you would like to replace it, where you would like to keep it, home maintenance items, etc. I think that those are opportunities to really think in categories for eBay. When you look at their growth, it's pretty slow. I think it was 2% last year. So that's not fast enough growth to really sustain this type of business over time. They need to accelerate growth, and they're going to have to do it in specific categories. So those would be my three core metrics, all very revenue focused, all very like price optimized as well, because on a per transaction basis, because eBay takes a cut. The bigger the transaction, the more I make. Namaan, you ready for some hot takes?
Let's do it. I'll kick us off here, January. I think in the next decade, you're going to see a fundamental rethink of eBay's business. And I think if we were filming this episode in 10 years, and maybe we should re-record this in 10 years and see if this turns out to be prescient or not, I think that advertising revenue will be the like a larger share of overall revenue, and perhaps even larger than some of the other categories we're talking about today. eBay has an incredibly large user base. eBay has incredibly detailed data on that user base, and that should lead to more targeted and more lucrative advertising opportunities. And so I think that in the next 10 years, advertiser services, like for example, email marketing, will become eBay's primary growth driver. Like it is not going to be able to help but monetize this large and active user base in new ways because it's stuck in this low single digits growth. And I think advertiser services is the way out for eBay.
That's awesome. I couldn't agree more. And I actually have my hot take is around the method that they're going to do that. So my hot take for eBay is that they're going to acquire businesses. I think you're going to see a bigger portfolio of eBay owned companies once they recognize that their main focus is this transaction category volume. I think you're going to see them roll up these small category areas that are doing better than they are. eBay is not a great user experience, and it's almost impossible to remake it. I wouldn't take the cash at eBay and spend it on myself. I would go spend it on the Poshmarks of the world. I'd go spend it on these, spa part suppliers and auto part suppliers. I'd go spend it on these category platforms where people can build trust. And one of the things that is a key hallmark of those platforms, guess how I found Poshmark? I searched for Samsonite luggage, and the Poshmark listing showed up. They are doing a better job of advertising their own listings now using core channels. So not just, I think you're talking about advertising inside the user base. Poshmark got me by going outside the user base. I wasn't already a Poshmark subscriber. And so I see them using their cash to acquire companies that are doing an optimal job of bringing new users and new categories into the platform, and then using the data and the algorithms that they have to cross-pollinate those customers with the data that they have across the business. So love the hot takes. 10 years, Namaan, where are we going to be in 10 years?
I'm hoping some private island in the Caribbean. We'll see.
I think you're still going to be wearing that shirt, if I'm honest.
Absolutely. I'm not a I'm not a Poshmark guy, so I'm going to keep my wardrobe the way it is.
Here's hoping. Here's hoping. Great. Well, I'm really excited to get some user feedback on eBay, but I just want to say to everybody listening, thank you so much for listening to this episode on eBay. We hope that you enjoyed it. We hope that your hot takes will add a little spice to our life, and we're looking forward to hearing back. So please, now you can drop a comment. You can drop a comment directly, and you can also always just reach out to us. Thanks so much for listening.
All right. Well, that's a wrap on Act 1. And now we've got a little intermission before Act 2 and Walgreens. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take 3 minutes for some questions. And so you can just use the chat, whether you're here on Zoom or you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, etc. Just type your question in. And then if you see a question you like, hit the like button, the thumbs up, and that'll let us know which questions you're most interested in, and we'll give those to Jenny Ray and Namaan. All right. First one from Rashawn. Rashawn, hey, good to see you, my friend. How does the emergent, Jenny Ray, I'll give this to you. how does the emergence of marketplaces like Facebook Marketplace, which leverages its massive existing user base and potentially incurs little customer acquisition cost, pose a threat to eBay? So how does FB Marketplace pose a threat to eBay?
Facebook Marketplace is a direct threat to Market Bay. I mean, to to Market Bay, to Facebook Marketplace is a direct threat to eBay. Absolutely, because anything that I can drop on somebody's porch moves off the eBay platform. So going back to what I said before, anything not sold on eBay is an opportunity for eBay. Anything that was potentially formerly sold on eBay because that was a primary marketplace for that moves onto another marketplace is a risk for eBay. And so Facebook Marketplace is absolutely a direct threat. One of the things that you'll see there are really interesting categories. Cars sold. You'll see, like I was talking about earlier, you'll see the furniture, these bigger kind of local items that are difficult to ship. I think the thing that eBay has in its favor is the reverse search. So when I think about Facebook Marketplace, if I'm treasure hunting, Facebook Marketplace is an optimal place to go. If I'm looking for something specific, if I'm looking for that 8-year-old Lego set, somebody in my local community who's selling it right now, that's going to be a lot more difficult to find. And also one of the things that Facebook Marketplace has not done is they've built a seller profile, but it's really just a human, right? It's not a business storefront. Whereas at eBay, it's like, I am the business for reselling gold jewelry. I'm the business for reselling Lego and other arcade games. I'm the business for doing these types of categorical sales. And so you have the opportunity to really build a business presence on eBay. So how do you compete with it? I mean, you go after things that are more needle in a haystack. You go after at the same time higher volume, but you also you think about why would somebody buy from Marketplace? It's easy, it's low risk. I can go check it out in advance. You simulate those exact same environments. So I think you really push the eBay Plus environment. I think in order to do that, you're probably going to have to put some other items. Like I mentioned before, like only used items are never going to be the largest share of what I purchase. I'm going to buy new items. So they're going to have to be categories of new items that I can also buy on eBay to make that more valuable for me.
If I could just add one more thing here, Japheth, I think when you think about eBay versus Facebook Marketplace, you think about the power of a brand, right? And so when I think about Facebook Marketplace, I think, okay, like 90% of what I sift through is going to be junk. I actually do have to go check it out beforehand before I buy it. I don't know what the condition is going to be. It might be like a 45-minute round trip drive where I get nothing out of it. I think the power of eBay's brand is that, okay, like I'm more likely to get something that's legitimate from eBay. I have buyer protections on eBay that I don't have on Facebook Marketplace. January, I think some of that trust kind of certification that you were talking about, like I never buy sports memorabilia without a certificate of authenticity, for example. Like there's no way I'm getting that from Facebook Marketplace. I could get that from eBay. And so I think that those buyer protections are like a big differentiator, and eBay can leverage its brand against Facebook Marketplace to kind of protect its business and maybe even expand share in certain categories.
Um, But right now, you have to assume that their primary business is focused on something you're looking for tactically specifically, right? A SKU, a specific item. You're not browsing eBay in order to get that. I think that if you're able to expand, into that, then you're able to compete. I don't know if you have bought something off of Facebook Marketplace and opted for shipping. I never have. So I think the day that Facebook figures that out is the real threat to eBay.
Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. Well, it's time for Act Two. Got to stick to the schedule. So we're going to get back into it, and then we'll have about 5 minutes for questions before we end today. So, Namaan, I'll turn it over to you to run into the next business breakdown.
Yeah,
That'll
absolutely.
require us to be on time, Japheth. So what do you think about that? You think we're going to do that? What are the
It's
odds?
possible.
Would you place a $1 bet on us?
I'll take that.
I
I think
like
that's
it.
like that's got to be like plus 20,000 odds, Japheth. Well, we're going to dive into this business breakdown on Walgreens, formerly known as Walgreens Boots Alliance. WBA, and Walgreens integrates retail with healthcare services. And so, for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with Walgreens or need a little bit of a refresher, Walgreens has a business model that includes three segments: pharmacy, retail, and wholesale. And I'm going to ask Jenny Ray to go over some of the high level stats in just a minute, but let me just define these three segments so we're all on the same page. So, the pharmacy segment of Walgreens business sells prescription drugs and provides pharmacy related services. I think what's important for everybody to know here is that it's 63% of Walgreens' total revenue. So, almost two-thirds of Walgreens' revenue comes from its pharmacy segment. Walgreens also has a retail segment. So they sell healthcare and other retail products, including non-prescription drugs, beauty products, toiletries, general merchandise. I think all of us probably have been inside of a Walgreens. We know that there's a wide selection of merchandise available to buy just over the counter. And that retail segment of Walgreens business accounts for 23% of its annual revenue. So about a quarter of its revenue comes from retail. And then the remaining 15% of Walgreens revenue comes from its wholesale and other line of business. So its wholesale line of business was formed just 5 years ago in partnership with McKesson, right? And so Walgreens owns a 70% controlling equity interest in this kind of combined wholesale business. And I think we all know that a wholesale business is just kind of selling, holding, distributing products that are manufactured by other manufacturers. And so Walgreens is getting into in the last 5 years this wholesale business as well. And then kind of the other part of Walgreens business refers to its technology-enabled care model. So Walgreens offers clinical programs. It collaborates strategically with other businesses inside of the Walgreens Boots kind of portfolio to provide healthcare services. So Walgreens does a lot, but as we've seen, two-thirds of its revenue is driven by its pharmacy segment. And so, with that, Jenny Ray, I'll turn things over to you. The company combines a really robust physical store network, like with a digital platform, right? It employs a multi-channel strategy. We'll get into that. But before we do, can you talk to us a little bit about the P&L?
Sure. So, Namaan, this is a tough business. I think that's just the first important thing to say, right? The business for fiscal year that ended August 31st lost money for the second year in a row. And so just kind of kicking it off, recognizing that this is a really hard business, I think is important. On sales of $148 billion, the gross profit was $27 billion, which is going to give us a really immediate clue into what kind of business we're operating here. But then they managed to turn that $27 billion and make it into a loss, a $14 billion annual operating income loss. Walgreens has an unbelievable store footprint, one of the strongest in the world, over 8,500 US stores, and they don't actually cite their international stores. They say several thousand. But we can assume that it's on approximately around 50% of the scale. But it's, again, like you'd have to do a little bit more of a back of the envelope than we did for this specific call. Certainly, if we were working with someone in the sector, we would do a much deeper dive on that. They have store closings planned because of these operating losses. And I'm going to just, right away put a note in the sand. I'm going to just like kick off with a hot take, which is I think it's necessary. And I also think that it's not going to fix the business. Right. Like I think it's kind of one of those things where like, yeah, you can't keep bleeding money. So you need to cut off an arm, but it's a real bummer to lose an arm because you would really like to have an arm later. And these store closings are, to me, the greatest asset of Walgreens. And the problem to me is not that they have too many stores open. The problem is the operating mechanisms inside the stores, their like customer retention process, customer experience, and more. And so even though like, yeah, as a business leader, you take that move indefinitely. I don't think that that's your ultimate goal. Your ultimate goal is not to reduce the size of the Walgreens footprint. Your ultimate goal is something else, and we'll talk about that something else as we go through it. So you want to talk about the business model, even though we just gave a giant fat clue when we were talking about the P&L.
Yeah, absolutely, Jenny Ray. Walgreens is a primarily variable cost driven business, and it doesn't mean it doesn't have fixed costs. I think when people think of Walgreens, they think of the massive physical store network and the retail footprint. They think, oh, that must be a fixed cost business because of that. But when you look at the P&L, you find actually that for every prescription that Walgreens fills, for every transaction that it facilitates, for every product that it sells, there is an incremental cost to that prescription being filled, to that product being sold. And that is a much larger share of the pie when it comes to Walgreens cost structure than its fixed cost footprint. And so Walgreens is a primarily variable cost based business that changes the way you look at the business. It changes the way that you think about turning the business around, and it changes the way that you think about what's important in terms of price versus volume. So if I'm a primarily variable cost based business, I'm looking to maximize the revenue that I can from each individual transaction and customer interaction versus just primarily thinking about volume. And so I think as we move through our discussion today, we'll be thinking more about Walgreens through that variable cost based lens, and you'll see how that affects some of the metrics that we've thought about in terms of how to turn this business around. So Jenny Ray, I'll let you lead off with your metrics first this time. What would you be thinking about as you think about turning Walgreens around?
First, a story. So the reason I wanted to put Walgreens on our radar is that I went into a Rite Aid recently. I love Rite Aid's ice cream, even though it's kind of weird and they serve it to you basically in a giant square. I love the fact that they have it. I think that the flavors are delicious, and my kids and I do ice cream Fridays regularly, and so that was our choice for ice cream Friday. And when I walked into the Rite Aid, the stores were basically, the shelves were empty. And somebody from behind the counter was like, "Yeah, we're in bankruptcy." And honestly, my thought was literally the store looks just about like it normally would, and y'all are behaving just like you normally would. So sometimes you can see bankruptcies before they come, and sometimes you're just like super unsurprised. But I wanted to focus on this sector because I wanted to understand what's happening in this space right now and what are the alternatives, what are disruptable opportunities inside the space. And so when I think about the three metrics, if I were going to turn Walgreens around with this operating loss that they're going after, they're obviously trying to avoid going down the bankruptcy line, just like Rite Aid currently is. The number one thing that I think about is repurchase rate. I'll tell you what, I go to Walgreens only if I have to. And it would be a really different customer situation if you were able to get your customers back to Walgreens more frequently. So things like finding people opportunities. They have a ton of seasonal merchandise. Usually in Walgreens, about 1/8 of the store is moving seasonally. Right. It's the like candy and the swag from Christmas, and now it's on to Valentine's Day, and then it will move on beyond that. But like that amount of turnover from your SKU base gives you opportunities to communicate with customers. But Walgreens doesn't give me an excuse to come in, and I try to avoid it at every chance that I can. So that's not a great customer situation or opportunity if I'm not bringing my customers into the store. And I'm only bringing them in when they have a prescription to fill or when they have something else going on. So especially on the retail side of the business, which Namaan, I don't know if you were able to dive into it. I tried. But just at the high level with a limited amount of time, I wasn't able to map the revenue to profit percentages. You know how we've kind of said, like, look, if it's membership fees, that just falls straight to the bottom line. My best guess is that wholesales are actually our highest margin on this business. Usually that's not the case for a wholesale business. And then I would say retail is next and pharmacy is third, but I don't know. I don't know that for sure. And it seems like the attention inside a Walgreens is really focused on the pharmacy portion of the business, which leaves this repurchase opportunity on the table for the retail side of the business. The second one is basket size. Yeah, like I do, there are ways that they've thought about this just in the basics, store design. You have to walk all the way to the back of the store, right, to get to get your items. But when I'm in line at a Walgreens in a drive-through, they are not offering me anything. And they could and they should, right? What else can we give you before you walk out of here today? Here's five core items that people are walking out with, right? There should be a screen for me to interact with because I'm usually waiting for 5 or 7 or 8 minutes. That time should be used to merchandise the customers. And so somebody in the store running around and grabbing 14 items for me while I'm waiting to buy something else, increasing my basket size, when you have a captive customer audience is an opportunity. And in a variable cost business, that's what you're trying to do. If you make a margin on every item that you sell me, you're trying to sell me more items and you're trying to figure out which items you're able to get to me. So if I'm fulfilling something for the cold and flu, like please, for heaven's sakes, like offer me, some throat lozenges and
A can of
some
chicken
over the
soup.
counter, yeah, a can of chicken soup and over the counter NyQuil and and like, yeah, something for comfort, something for fun, right? So I think like just increasing basket size is my number two. And then the third one is the payer mix. Now, I don't want to isolate this because this could be my personal experience, but I own a small business. My small business, it does not make sense for me to pay for private insurance. So I use an exchange, which basically makes it look to medical providers like I am a cash payer. For me, the experience at Walgreens is not catered to me, but I'm an amazing customer segment for them. Like they should want me. I might be small, but I pay every dollar that I pay, no one else is paying for. They don't have to submit that claim anywhere and it goes straight to their bottom line. And they could charge me 50% less than somebody else and 20% more than their margin and still make money on me because of the ease of that process. Well, there's no cash pay prices. There's no price transparency. They don't really focus on that payer mix. I think they just kind of are assuming that they're going to get what they get. And so I think having the opportunity to really target specific payer mixes, especially on the pharmacy side, would transfer to the other two metrics that I've already mentioned. What about you, Namaan?
January, I think those are great metrics. They're compelling. I thought about the business differently, and I think we have a little bit of disagreement here, which I love, because
Good.
the first thing that I would focus on is closing underperforming stores. I agree with you that you cannot cut your way to growth, but I think where Walgreens is at today, they need to stabilize operations and they need to enhance cash flow. And I think when you are losing money, that is priority number one. And the biggest way that you can do that is by closing underperforming stores. And the way that I define underperformance is stores that have lower revenue today than they did 3 years ago. Because I think one of the things you have to do when you think about underperformance is, okay, what does that mean in our business? And so the way that I defined it, looking at Walgreens P&L, looking at historical performance, is stores that are underperforming relative to where they were 3 years ago. I think somewhere north of 70% of the US population lives within a 5 mile radius of a Walgreens. There probably is oversaturation in terms of Walgreens retail footprint. We can afford to close underperforming stores and still retain the accessibility like in local communities that kind of sets us apart from something like maybe an Amazon pharmacy or some other competitors that are springing up. And so
I agree, by the way, with the principle of that. What I was mentioning earlier is like, I think that I trust Walgreens not at all to actually execute on this in a way that satisfies customers. Because, yeah, I mean, in my city, there are 3 Walgreens. If you pull me to one, I might still go to Walgreens, but not if my wait time is 3x as long, not if
fair.
my experience is 3x as poor. And so I don't think you get that aggregate benefit until you actually are executing in store well. And I don't see that from Walgreens.
100%. I do think that you need to stabilize your core retail pharmacy operations and they need to rationalize their retail footprint. And I agree with you. I don't think they're going to do a great job of it, but like, if I was there, that's what I'd be thinking about too. And I would do that first before I focus on reigniting growth. So closing those underperforming stores, rationalizing that footprint, that would be kind of job number one for me if I was there. The second thing I'd be thinking about is my wholesale revenue as a percentage of my overall revenue. And so the wholesale kind of line of business at Walgreens is the fastest growing piece of the pie. When I looked at historical performance at Walgreens, retail and pharmacy, those two segments have been flat for the last 2 years in terms of revenue. So like growth is coming from the wholesale side of the business. And you're right, that's also where a lot of the margin is coming from. And so again, just to reorient everybody, wholesale is the business of purchasing, storing, and distributing products from manufacturers to customers. And so I think even if we rationalize and reduce our retail footprint, we still can use that as a competitive advantage and use those locations as distribution hubs. And so I'd be thinking about wholesale revenue as a percentage of overall revenue and continuing to accelerate the growth inside of that segment of the business. The third thing that I'd be looking at is percentage of my revenue that comes from e-commerce. And I think this is now where we're starting to get to like the customer experience, right? The wait time. You were talking about, okay, like we should be looking to increase basket size by offering, right, throat lozenges with the prescription, right? I think an easier way to do that is through e-commerce and through kind of AI and machine learning driven recommendations that are like automatically kind of populated depending on what you have in your cart. And so I think the biggest threat to Walgreens pharmacy business is Amazon pharmacy. And so I think that they need to fundamentally rethink some of their business model, right? And I actually would not be trying to increase foot traffic to bring people back into the stores as much as I'd be focused on growing the percentage of sales that are completed via my app or completed via e-commerce. And I would start to think about if I could offer prescription delivery, right? When I look at the Walgreens consumer, I see a consumer that is typically lower to middle income, right? And so I think that there's an opportunity there to maybe like to capture that consumer away from Amazon, like if that particular demographic isn't able or willing to pay for a Prime membership. And so, can I keep their prescription business with me, especially if delivery or a simplified pickup experience is a part of the value proposition, right? And I'm not an expert when it comes to like pharmaceutical like regulations, but like I could see Walgreens moving to a concept like Amazon lockers, where I can like order my prescription through the app. I don't have to wait in like a 30-minute drive-through line. It's sitting in a secure locker for me, and I'm sent a code, and I can go unlock that locker, pick up my prescription, right, and leave, right? Or I can like I have been offered other like products in my cart, right? I've added those to my cart along with my prescription. My whole order is sitting right in the locker ready for me to pick up, right? So I'm able to increase basket size. I'm also able to increase the convenience factor, right? And I think that's what they're going to have to do if they're going to protect right 2/3 of their business from these upstart competitors that are popping up in the space.
That's good, Namaan. Yeah, I think recognizing that the main reason that people go to Walgreens is you're sick and you need a prescription, and then the other stuff is gravy. You cannot refocus your business onto why someone else would come into the store. So when we focus on hot takes, I really think we're going to see a complete modernization of the customer experience inside the Walgreens. And actually, I have like a way too far hot take that I'm not 100% sure is going to happen, but I think there's something on it. I think you're going to be able to get food at somewhere like this, and I think it's going to be a really simple offering, like for real milkshakes and hot dogs or something like that. But I think anytime you have a drive-through mechanism, you're going to what you want to think through is how many customers you can process through, but also how much you can get them out the door as they're going through. And so I thought, like, what is something that Costco has, Costco Pharmacy, that other people don't have? They have, you can also grab a hot dog when you're there. It's like a one-stop shop type of item. And so if I'm going to wait in line for those minutes and I'm thinking about what else I might want to purchase, some like limited amount of either co-merchandising where you have a Starbucks in the store, where you have a very like lightweight Dunkin' Donuts or something like that, right? Where you're like who are you creating these co-reasons for orgs to exist, I think would be massive. And I expect to see probably like a third reduction in SKUs in store, and then a movement toward this increase in basket size, but more like bossy recommendations, right? For using AI. Hey, you're here for this. You probably also need these three things. You bought this last Christmas. You should buy it again this Christmas. Just more, and I would love for them to be more intelligent about me. I think I would spend more money with them if they were.
I like that. I had lunch. I was in Pennsylvania this last weekend. I had lunch at a Sheetz. If you don't know Sheetz, it's a gas station, right? So, you could, I could certainly see people, yeah, picking up some comfort food as they're picking up their medicine at a Walgreens. My hot take is a little bit different. I think Walgreens is in 2025 going to split from the parent company, and I think they're going to be taken private. So when you think about private equity in the US, they're sitting on $3 trillion right now of unallocated capital. That is a hell of a lot of dry powder. And I think that like Walgreens is an attractive target for private equity to come in. And going private would give Walgreens the breathing room that it needs to streamline its operations, to cut costs, to reimagine its business model away from the scrutiny of the public markets. And so my hot take is I think Walgreens is private by the end of this year.
Love it. Awesome. Well, I mean, I think we should just keep talking so that Japheth loses money. What do you think?
I think that's a good call.
Well, just to wrap it up, this is a tough business when you're trying to, utilize a highly regulated pharmaceutical sector, and pharmaceutical service. You have certainly staff requirements that can be really challenging to fulfill. You're trying to create a working environment for those staff members, but you're also using 95% of your footprint for something totally different. I think I think what both of us are feeling is that Walgreens is unfocused with what it needs to do. It hasn't done what it thought it needed to do. It knew that it needed to grow revenue, but it did it in a way that where it didn't focus on that margin growth. On the variable cost side. And so thinking about how can we get everybody who comes in the store to spend more is a different premise than how do we acquire new customers. And I think just for the season that they're in, Walgreens is ripe for disruption. So, stay tuned, pay attention. But also, when you're interacting with businesses like this, start to think under the surface. This is a real opportunity for you not just to stand in line and be frustrated, but to think, wow, like if they made this faster, would I buy more? Right? Maybe they don't want you to be faster in line for certain reasons. If they move it online, what risk does that pose to the larger business? That's really the point of business breakdowns, is to ask those bigger questions.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jenny Ray and Namaan. That was really insightful and excited to continue the conversation here. With our last 3 minutes, would love to get some company takes from everybody here tuning in. So drop them in the chat. I've already been seeing a couple of them come in. So, let us know which companies you'd like to see profiled on the next business breakdowns. And then any kind of final questions you've got for Jenny Ray, Naman, or myself.
Yeah, floor is open. So anything that y'all want to ask about these two businesses, then we're happy to do that. You can also ask broader questions as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've got Qualcomm, we've got Adobe, Boeing, love it. Palantir, CBRE. Okay, these are great. We're gonna make notes of all of these, and we'll do our best to slot them into the publishing order here.
I love this question that's in the chat, Japheth. I know I can't see everything, but there's one here that says, "Is expanding to Canada good for Walgreens?" Naman and I probably have no idea. Right, we're like armchair experts for 10 minutes on this company. But here's how I would think about it, and this is kind of what we want to give you guys, is not an answer, but a framework of how you would think about it. Do customers in a Walgreens or a Walgreens-like facility in Canada, do they spend more per transaction? On the categories that we talked about? Is it a more lucrative pharmaceutical market? The answer usually in a like payer market like Canada is no. Are they likely to purchase more merchandise? Are they likely to have bigger basket sizes? Usually the US is kind of the gold standard for this. And so my best guess is probably no. Like growth into Canada is no, because of the metrics that we just talked about. But if they proved to be different, then absolutely we would take a separate look at those.
Yeah, I agree. I think the single payer healthcare model is probably the biggest reason I would say no initially. Canada is a market that's 10% of the size of the US. So you'd have to capture outsized share for it to be meaningful and to move the needle for you. Remember, Walgreens is a $140 billion plus company. So the opportunity needs to be big enough to be worth the effort. And my gut feeling is, especially now when you're losing money and you need to focus on stabilizing operations, expanding to a new geographical market this isn't quite the right time to do that.
The only thing you spend your cash on is future cash generation in current stores. That's your number one strategic focus right now. How do you make sure that each one of those stores has not 2% or negative 5% growth, but actual increase in growth going forward?
Amazing. Okay. Well, thanks everybody. We're at time, so we're gonna say uh, see you later. But thanks for tuning in, and make sure to catch us on Tuesdays right here at Management Consulted. Excited to keep bringing great content to you. If there's any questions that you weren't able to get answered, please reach out. Find us on LinkedIn, so you can find Jenny Ray and Namaan, myself. And then you can always send us an email. We're very accessible. The email is team@managementconsulted.com. That's TEAM at managementconsulted.com. Jenny Ray or Namaan, any last words?
No, just that if I see some black belts that are here, welcome. If you want to join black belt, just don't forget next week is the deadline. Hope to see you inside. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.